This man is considered one of the most cold-blooded serial killers in Europe. He is from Germany, 47 years old at the time of his arrest, and works as a truck driver. It has never been possible to determine how many people he really murdered. The perpetrator himself took care of that. But Eckert definitely committed at least 6 murders. And well over 30 other attacks on women can also be attributed to him. But how did the serial killer Volker Eckert finally get caught? And what goes on in the mind of a man who calls himself a monster? On November 3, 2006, the body of 20-year-old Miglena Petrova Rahim was found. The Bulgarian woman was murdered in her new home, the Spanish town of San Julián de Ramirez. The young sex worker died of violence to the neck. A truck can be seen on a surveillance camera near the crime scene at around the time of the crime. This is particularly noticeable because it has German license plates. The Spanish police pass the data on to their German colleagues so that they can pick up the driver of the now suspicious truck. The truck belongs to a transport company based in eastern Germany. The driver of the vehicle in question is 47-year-old Volker Eckert. The German police plan to make their move on November 17, 2006. On that day, Volker Eckert is on the road in Cologne with his truck. Police arrest him at his truck and take him to the station for a first interrogation. When asked about the murder of Miglena, he initially makes no statement. During the interrogation, Volker Eckert begins complaining of a headache and asks for permission to get a medication from his vehicle. The police do not allow this. Instead, an officer goes to the truck to get the medication from the glove compartment. And there he finds something incredible: Polaroid photos of a woman with a cord around her neck. In addition, 2 ropes and handwritten notes that precisely document the sequence of murders. Under one of the Polaroids is written, "Miglena, 20 years old, I just had to strangle her." It is clear that Volker Eckert is indeed the murderer of the dead sex worker. But when the interrogation continues in Eckert's truck after this discovery, there is an unexpected turn. The suspect confesses not only to the killing of Miglena, but also to another crime. Volker Eckert spills the beans about a murder that no one knew about for 32 years. It is May 7th, 1974. 15-year-old Sylvia Yu lives with her family in Plauen in the former GDR, and is dead. Her own mother finds her daughter's body in the family apartment. The police, who were alerted, initially classified Sylvia's death as a suicide. She was found strangled, and the investigators assumed that she had inflicted the fatal injuries on herself with the help of a clothesline from the kitchen. Therefore, there were no further police investigations, no files, no records, and no witness statements. Instead, there is only a death certificate stating the cause of death as suicide. Sylvia's own stepfather works for the police and believes that the girl's death was a crime. In retrospect, it is suspected that a possible homicide, especially of a police officer's daughter in the GDR, was better left unaddressed. Because Sylvia's stepfather is right. There is someone responsible for the death of the young woman. When Volker Eckert was arrested for the murder of Miglena in 2006, he suddenly started talking about Sylvia. Volker Eckert and Sylvia were classmates and attended the same class. He says he always felt very attracted to Sylvia, especially because of her long hair, and that he killed Sylvia. He claims to have planned the crime meticulously. At the time, Volker lived in the house next to Sylvia's and used a passageway to get to her apartment at her parents'. At the time, Volker was only 14 years old. At first, He pretended to need Sylvia's help with his homework. When Sylvia read him one of the tasks, he seized the opportunity and began to strangle her. During the act, it became clear to him that Sylvia could report him, so he decided to kill her and make it look like she had taken her own life. At first, the police officers find this story hard to believe, but Volker Eckert is able to provide a very precise sketch of the crime scene and how the bodies were found. His drawing matches the details provided by Sylvia's mother exactly. The 47-year-old is telling the truth. Contrary to previous assumptions, Sylvia's death was not a murder, committed by her former classmate Volker Eckert. He may have decided to make a statement about the Sylvia case in order to be charged in Germany. After all, he was originally arrested for the murder of Miglena, which he committed in Spain. Accordingly, the German authorities could have extradited him to Spain. However, due to his statement about the Sylvia U case, the probability increases that he will be charged in his home country of Germany. And that is exactly what happens. Because of the many recordings and photos that Eckert kept, the investigators quickly realized one thing: Volker Eckert had murdered far more than twice. DNA evidence can be used to prove that Volker Eckert committed at least 6 murders. He committed these crimes while working as a truck driver in other European countries. He sometimes photographed or even filmed his crimes. In several of his crimes, he used ropes as killing tools. 2 ropes were found in his truck cabin shortly after his arrest. He also cut strands of hair from some of the women and kept them with the film and photo files. He also kept clothing, accessories, or makeup products from some of the murdered women. Volker Eckert started working as a truck driver in 1999. On June 21, 2001, he killed a woman named Sandra Ossifou in Bordeaux, France. Just like the other victims of Eckert, she worked in the red light district. The young woman is only 21 years old when Volker Eckert lures her into his truck under the pretext of hiring her services. Her body is found 4 days later about 90 kilometers away on the side of an expressway. The cause of death is determined to be violence to the neck. Her killer is never found until the extensive investigations against Volker Eckert begin. In August 2001, Volker Eckert then kills a woman named Beatriz Diaz in Lloret de Mar in Spain. In 2004, the murder of Ayobi Gali in Italy follows. In 2005, Volker Eckert murders a Russian woman named Marie Veselova near Girona. A year later in France, a Polish woman named Agnieszka Bus. I would love to tell you more about the women, about their stories, about who they were and how they lived. Unfortunately, however, Volker Eckert's choice of victims has achieved exactly the desired result. We hardly know anything about the women he murdered. After the murder of his fellow student in 1974, Volker Eckert only attacked women from the red light district. And he did this deliberately because he hoped that, due to their social stigma, there would be less of a search for these women. And he was right. Some of the women killed were not even reported missing before their bodies were found. Not by friends, colleagues, or family members. Therefore, at this point, it should be said for all of these women that they had desires, dreams, and goals, just like everyone else. All of that was destroyed by Volker Eckert, just so he could live out his urges and fantasies. Eckert sees himself as a victim of his own desires. After his arrest, he gave the police and psychologists insights into his preferences and how he became a murderer. He talks, for example, about a crucial experience in his childhood. He says he played with one of his sister's dolls and felt aroused by the doll's long hair. The whole thing happened at a much earlier age than with other adolescents. He was about 9 or 10 years old when he started using the doll as a model for pleasuring himself. From that point on, long hair seems to have become more and more interesting for Volker Eckert. One of his mother's wigs also caught his attention. He finds the hairpiece in his family's attic and uses it for his own stimulation as well. Eckert develops a preference for hair, which is referred to as trichophilia in specialist circles. In his case, this is so intense that he can soon only concentrate on the long hair of his female classmates at school. In a documentary, expert Lydia Benecca describes how Eckert was possibly ashamed of this preference and therefore tried to live it out in secret. At the same time, Eckert developed an aversion to his own mother during his youth. The reason for this is the separation of his parents. In a later conversation with investigators, Eckert says that the separation made him very afraid of being thrown out by a woman in the same way that his mother did his father. Apparently, Eckert blames his mother entirely for the separation. All of this happened during his adolescence and had a profound impact on Volker Eckert for the rest of his life. Regarding his preferences, he later writes, "In my fantasies, I put my hands around these women's necks and squeezed their throats." At the age of 14, he committed his first murder of his classmate Sylvia Yu, who was the same age as him. In 1974, shortly after the murder of Sylvia, Volker Eckert was arrested in the GDR and sentenced to 18 months in prison. However, he was not convicted of a crime against another person, but of theft. He had stolen his mother's car. Sylvia's murder remains undiscovered. After his release, however, his urges become more and more intense, and Eckert decides to act them out. No longer just with his mother's wig or his sister's doll, but with real people. He begins to systematically attack women in his hometown of Plauen. Volker says that he usually attacked the women from behind in the dark. This was to ensure that the victims would not recognize him and be able to press charges. He says he never intended to kill anyone. His primary motivation was to touch the women's hair and choke them. Eckert is said to have always behaved normally towards his partners and to have acted out his preferences with them within a normal framework. He's said to have confined his extreme preferences to consuming content and to a doll. A doll was found in 2006 when the police searched Eckert's apartment after his arrest. He had since moved to southern Germany. Volker Eckert is said to have dressed the rubber doll in items of clothing that he had kept from his murder victims and put wigs on her head. This allowed him to relive the murders over and over again and use them as a template for his own stimulation. He also takes Polaroid photos of these acts. It was only in 1978 that he was caught during one of his nightly attacks on a woman and sentenced to prison. However, he was released on probation the following year, in 1979. Knowing that the police now had him on record for assaulting a woman, he tried to suppress his urges in the years that followed. But soon he was roaming the streets of Plauen again at night, attacking women as before. In 1987, Eckert was arrested again in Plauen after 2 assaults. One of the survivors was able to identify him, and Volker Eckert was convicted of attempted murder. This time, he received a longer prison sentence. He was originally sentenced to 12 years, but after 6 years, he was released on probation again for good behavior. A psychologist determined that Eckert posed no danger. The therapeutic measures were deemed sufficient to prevent further acts of violence. In retrospect, this is a fatal miscalculation. The survivor who identified Volker Eckert at the police station and thus put him behind bars tells how her nightmare began again after Eckert's release. One night, Volker Eckert suddenly appeared at her door. The man who had almost killed her years before. She didn't open the door for him, but Eckert started talking to her over the intercom. He pretended to be a repairman who urgently needed to come to her apartment because of a water pipe break. But she recognized Eckert through the peephole and didn't let him in. After his release from prison, Volker Eckert began his series of murders. In 1999, Eckert took a job as a long-distance truck driver. According to some sources, He's said to have said that he had deliberately chosen this job so that he could attack women more easily. His work often takes him to other European countries, making it difficult for the authorities to investigate him as a perpetrator. The series only ends in 2006 because the surveillance camera at one of the crime scenes happens to film his truck. If that hadn't happened, Volker Eckert might not have been caught for years. Or maybe never. Volker Eckert does not consider the murders he committed to be a real punishment. Before a trial can take place, Volker Eckert is found dead in his prison cell in July 2007. He hanged himself at the age of 48, one day after his birthday. He is said to have been deeply hurt because his sister did not visit him in prison on that occasion. Ultimately, Eckert killed himself in a similar way to the women whose lives he took. He hanged himself with a curtain from his prison cell, thus avoiding criminal proceedings and a conviction, and a further reappraisal of the events. It is suspected that Eckert may have committed at least 4 more murders. During his time as a long-distance truck driver, he may have killed another woman in France and 3 more in the Czech Republic. However, due to his early death, these crimes can no longer be proven against him. These 4 women may never know justice, because the man who may have murdered them chose to take his own life. If you found the video interesting, I would be very happy to receive feedback. If you want more completed cases, feel free to write it in the comments. This way you also support the channel at the same time. Because interactions, i.e. comments or likes, increase the likelihood that the video will be suggested to people who have not yet subscribed to Insolito. Otherwise, there is not much more to say. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you watch the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao guys.